In this video, I'm going to be explaining HODLAY as an access token and how that actually works and what that means for the community. So first off, let's define what an access token is for anyone that doesn't know what an access token is in the context of crypto. And I'll start off by telling a story. So one time I was at an event, and one of my favorite, you could call him influencers in the space, but he's, I think, a marketing genius, was truly revolutionary in everything marketing, and that's Gary V or Gary Vaynerchuk. If you haven't heard of him, you must not be in the marketing space, because basically anyone in that space has heard of him, or even in business. I mean, he's pretty well known, but that's neither here nor there. But I had the opportunity to ask him a question when I was at an event one time, after having been following him for several years. And I know I sound a little bit like a groupie telling the story because I was excited to talk to him, but I think he's a really good dude, and I'm a big fan for that reason, in terms of I think he has really good intentions and brings more to the table than just being good at a specific craft, which is marketing. But I asked him a question about NFTs, and I asked him a question about what should your community, if you had an NFT, because I don't have an NFT project yet. I have one I'm working on, but we'll talk about that later when it's actually out. And it's at the time of release, it's actually not even going to be for sale. So it's not something I'm trying to hype by any means, but I'm just mentioning that because it gives context to this question. But I asked him, for people offering an NFT, for your business, if you had a business, what should be the one thing that your NFT should offer? And he said one word: access. And what he meant by that was access to the community. Maybe it's access to the founder, access to the team. So it's almost like a mastermind group in terms of that concept. And you might be watching this and saying, well, that's great. So what, I'm getting access to you? Who are you? I don't even know you. And the truth is like, relatively speaking, I'm a nobody, right? I've done, in terms of, my biggest network or my biggest following is on my HVAC channel, because I had a heating and air conditioning business before this that I sold, and it was just making me miserable. I was really unhappy, and so I had to get rid of it. I recently had a daughter that was born, and that kind of changed my life and my perspective on things, to where I realized I needed to pursue my passions sooner rather than later, and that business wasn't my passion, and it was time to move on. But I still have the YouTube channel, because that was mine on the exit. And that YouTube channel, we've got like 30,000 followers, and that was my first experience with building a social media following in a space that's relatively boring, and it's also something people purchase once every 10, 20 years. So it was an interesting thing to build. I had to figure out, okay, how do I make this appealing, or how do I make this engaging to get people to view the content? And it's also bottom of the funnel content. And the reason I'm bringing that up and kind of talking about that is in the context of access. Right now I say I'm a nobody, and so having access to me doesn't mean anything, or having access to the community doesn't mean anything. But that's because that's at the time of filming this video. If you're watching this video 1 year from now, and this is a viral sensation, and we've had major engagement on social media platforms, then okay, maybe suddenly having access to the community is a big deal. And that's the benefit for people that ape in early. Now, and if you ape in late, the good news is that people can still buy access. It's just about whether or not you have time or money, but it does become more expensive towards the end. And the reason that we're making it an access token is because if we build an actual community, most meme coins just dump. But if there's an actual value here, there's a tangible value here. It's not about the token, and it's not about just the price skyrocketing, which that's what they all do. And then also prioritize people that are the top holders to have more direct access, both to me and both to the other top holders in the community. And the way that we're structuring this, or the way I have it structured in my mind, and in terms of figuring out logistics, it's kind of one of those things where that happens as things progress and develop. Because right now we're talking about a community that has 100 members that have barely aped in. It's a low market cap. We can't afford to do. There's no point in really doing a meetup or a meeting or anything like that. We need to get this project launched and off the ground. And when I say launch, it's already launched, but we're talking about launched in terms of a marketing perspective. And that's part of what all these videos that you're watching are about, is about how to get to meet the developer, meet the team, meet what we're actually doing and what we're a part of. And that way you kind of feel comfortable knowing at least, who to kill if things don't work out. I'm just kidding. But no, seriously, if most people, what happens is the dev will do like a rug pull or something, and that's why people hate the space. And I'm not doing that. That's why I'm putting myself out there, because this is about a bigger mission than me. So we'll talk some more about the access, but the way I have it worked out in my head is that, and written down, at least for now, but in terms of, and we've looked into some of the logistics of it, is the access is granted in those various phases as the community gets bigger. And so, in the beginning, it's going to be at various market caps. We'll have an event for the top 10 coin holders, top 100, top 1,000, and then ultimately we'll get to the point where we'll have a top 10,000 holders event. And then my goal is with some of those larger events to make those larger events streamed globally. And so that way the information is publicly available. And then the smaller events might be behind closed doors or partly behind closed doors but we might also broadcast that too, because the whole, it's going to be something where there's a voting component to it, which, I explain in another video more in depth, but that's where your token also counts as a vote. And what I mean is, because we're using this to launch a philanthropic endeavor or a private foundation, then I'm basically going to be at the head of at the end of this. And the reason I decided to launch it this way is that, number one, it's a way to add a lot of value for people that buy in at the beginning, in terms of if my ideas are good enough that, it's all about, we live in a meritocracy. So if my ideas are good enough that people will buy into them and support that philanthropy, that idea of both philanthropy, building an access token, building a real community, having real transparency inside of a space that is typically not transparent, and people wonder if they're investing in vaporware and what's going to happen. Is this thing going to vanish in a day? And one thing that we want to do, or that I'm making kind of unique with that access pass. So for example, let's say you're one of the top 10 holders, is we want to make that actually transferable, meaning that as long as you are a holder, that just gives you access to the events. And we can't have these events for free, meaning like we're just going to cover our cost. And so we're going to be one of the most transparent organizations in the world, in the sense of like, we'll poll people, hey, where do you guys want to do this event? Hey, what do you guys want to do? Do you want to do it on a boat? Do you want to do it, at the Ritz? You want to do it at Motel 6 in, wherever? What city do we want to do it in? And we'll have that kind of level of transparency where people can chime in on what would be preferable for them. And then it's kind of like a majority rules sort of thing, or we'll figure out some compromises that work best for everyone, because I realize there's going to be people from all over the world. But having it be transferable means that, let's say you're one of the top 10 holders, but you're more of an introvert and you just aped into this thing because you wanted to get rich. And all of a sudden you're staring at your wallet and you're like, oh my gosh, I've got $50 million worth of HODLAY tokens. Do I push the sell button? Well, we want to incentivize you to not do that and stay with the community, because that transferable access pass could be something to where when we have an event, like, people might even pay to use that. Or what we would urge you to do that would be cooler and really changes a lot of people's lives is that by making it transferable, that means, let's say you're not the type that really has a big vision or mission or something that you're trying to, accomplish. And that hasn't come to the forefront of your mind yet, just because of, where you're at. And that's totally fine. Everyone has different desires, and I'm not telling you have to. But if, let's say, you have a nephew or a cousin or a friend or someone that that was like, oh my gosh, you have access to that community, I would love to go to that event. With that access pass, they now have access to where you can say, hey, my nephew's going to take my ticket, and it's transferable, meaning that they can gain access to the event. And again, like I said, these events will still have, a cost that we have to cover, because if we're hosting an event center, or if we're doing it a hotel or doing something else, we're just looking to cover our costs. We're not trying to make money and be promoters of events necessarily in that respect. It's really about creating community and democratizing information that empowers people, because that's what is at the core of the group and the community. It's about empowering people, and that's what's at the core of my foundation, which again, I talk about in another video, so I'm not going to dive into that too much here. But that's one important thing that I wanted to bring up and make sure I mentioned, is that if you are one of the top holders at any of those tiers or thresholds, that access pass is transferable. So if you come to the events for a few years and then you want someone else to come afterwards, you don't have to sell your position, or they don't have to buy their position in HODLAY, which, as the entry cost could become substantially higher, which might make it cost prohibitive. And so you would be in a position to where you could, help someone out, because you can hold that access pass for as long as you are a holder of the tokens in that level. And so it incentivizes people to hold, and because they want to be a part of a community that's really making a difference in the world, and they want to be surrounded by like-minded people. And what I am, looking forward to, and what I'm excited about, is kind of changing the game in terms of how things are done and launched, and kind of making history in that respect, but also creating a true blockchain democracy in terms of how you vote with your dollars, meaning that if you're a token holder and you get a vote, on what we're doing, I want to create the most transparent private foundation that's ever existed in the history of the world, in the sense of we'll do public reviews of what we're making grants for and how those funds were used, and we'll do deep dives on the marketing efforts of the organizations that we donated to or how they're using those funds. And the reason I'm such a big, because like if you research private foundations, which again, I'll talk more about that in other videos, some people talk about them in the context of a tax trick of the rich. And so you'll be looking at me and thinking, this doesn't excite me. This is just a tax loophole. He's still making himself rich. And when I was thinking about, I spent the last year since I sold my company thinking about what I want to do with my life after selling. And the thing that resonated with me the most, because of my experience in marketing, my natural draw towards being creative and artistic, was doing marketing for nonprofits in the nonprofit space, but doing it on an in-kind donation receipt basis, so I didn't have to charge them. But because I don't really have cash flow, because I didn't sell for my company for multiple 7, multiple 8 figures, because I was selling before it was really ready to exit. It was saleable at the time, but it wasn't stitched up perfectly to where I was at a nice sweet spot where I would get top dollar and a top multiple on it, even though they're very in demand right now. But I still got a lot more than it was actually worth, because I stuck to my guns and I needed that in order to get out, just because I had a lot of liabilities to cover on the exit. But I settled on, okay, I want to help nonprofits, but okay, how am I going to do this financially? And then when this kind of started evolving was because one of my close friends was launching has been a part of coins in the space, and he had done this in the past, and he had talked to me, we were talking about it, and then I realized, okay, I'm already launching this NFT project that I've been working on for, it's been years in the making. I didn't know it was going to be an NFT project at the time. That'll make more sense later when it comes out, but and that was more a similar concept in terms of making it like an access token and / little small tight-knit mastermind group of people that want to make a difference in the world and work together to do so. But this kind of started to evolve as I launched, because I just knew I wanted to launch the token. I figured out the branding, I figured out HODLAY and the expression of HODLAY and what that means, and I loved it, and I was like, all right, I'm sold on this. And then so this concept of the access token and creating votes where people's votes count, and you guys will have the opportunity to participate in polls on what we're doing. And the reason I want to do this is because if you look around the world right now, there's a lot of disbelief that there's good in the world, or there's good people exist. I mean, it's easy to focus on the negative because there's so much conflict bombarding us every day. That's what the news likes to show you, because that's what makes them money and sells ads. And that is why I'm launching this now, and I believe this project is more important now more than ever, especially because it's launching at the beginning of the biggest crypto bull run in the history of the world. We're having regulation come in to an industry that's been widely unregulated until now, and it is truly going to create stability in the industry in a way that we have not seen in the past 10, 15 years. And so I'm really excited for that. I think the timing is perfect. And I think that's kind of why the universe works in the way it works, and which is sometimes mysterious. And I think that's why things are happening in the order that they're happening. And so, hopefully that access token component made sense to you. And in terms of how often we have those events and when, more will be revealed as we kind of grow. But the plan, again, is as we get to bigger market caps where it's worth talking about, we're going to be having those top 10, top 100, top 1,000 events. And then when we get to the final end goal, which I talk about in another video, which is not the end goal, but it's the goal where we ape a significant investment and start the foundation and have a big celebration. And then it really kicks off the community in a lot of ways, where we have the ability to internally manage our events and have manage access to those events and maintain that community, continue to build it. And that's going to happen as things grow and progress. So if you're watching this and you're early, I really appreciate you having some faith and or being willing to have some faith. I don't expect you to take me at face value, even though that's kind of how I operate by, because I'm pretty trusting, but I'm also not naive. So don't make that mistake. I am definitely aware that in this space I am swimming with sharks, and so, but I really do want to make a difference, and I want to make a difference in the world and make ultimately give people something to believe. This is almost like a light at the end of the tunnel, in the sense of like, wow, that's actually really inspiring that we all worked together to do something really great. And you're making my dream come true in terms of being able to become a full-time philanthropist and watch the, who is Howard Bynder video to get to know a little bit about my background, because I'm done explaining the access token and I don't want to ramble too much longer in this, but just wanted to give you kind of a high level overview of where we're going and what this token actually brings to the table and what it is that you're actually aping into. And so welcome to HODLAY, and check out those next videos.